Negotiation is a skill we use more often than we realize. Whether we're asking for a raise, striking a deal in business, or even deciding where to go on vacation, we're constantly negotiating. Yet for many of us, the idea of negotiation brings to mind images of boardrooms, tough conversations, and a battle of wills, where someone wins and someone loses. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if negotiation wasn't about winning or losing at all, but about finding common ground, building partnerships, and discovering creative solutions that leave everyone better off? In reality, negotiation is as much about listening as it is about speaking, and often, the most powerful moves come from silence, curiosity, and empathy. The person sitting across from you isn't your adversary. They could be your greatest ally if you know how to approach the conversation. Chapter 1. Steering: The True Nature of Negotiation. On a warm afternoon during their honeymoon in Hawaii, a couple rented a two-person kayak to explore a peaceful river. They were excited about the adventure, imagining it would be a relaxing ride where they could just glide through the calm water, take in the beautiful views, and enjoy each other's company. What they didn't realize was how quickly their seemingly simple outing would turn into a frustrating struggle. At first, it seemed easy. They got into the kayak, picked up their paddles, and pushed off. But within minutes, they ran into their first problem. She wanted to head towards the left bank, where the trees hung low over the water, creating an inviting shaded area. He, on the other hand, was eager to explore the open water on the right. Neither of them said anything at first, but each started paddling in their preferred direction, assuming the other would follow along. But that didn't happen. The kayak wobbled and started to tip. Before they knew it, they were both in the water, their once dry clothes now completely soaked. They laughed it off, climbed back in, and tried again. But this time, they were more stubborn. Each person paddled harder, more determined to steer in their own direction. Of course, the same thing happened. They capsized. This wasn't going as planned. After getting back into the kayak for the third time, the mood had shifted. What had started as a fun and lighthearted outing now felt tense and frustrating. As they sat there in the water, soaked and tired, they finally realized the problem wasn't the kayak or the river, it was them. They weren't working together. Both had their own idea of where they wanted to go, but neither had taken the time to ask the other what they were thinking. They were too focused on controlling the direction themselves to even consider the possibility of finding a common path. In that moment, they had a choice: keep fighting for control or figure out how to paddle together. They paused, talked, and agreed on a direction. This time, instead of battling each other, they paddled in sync, both working towards the same goal. It was a simple shift, but it made all the difference. They didn't capsize again. This experience taught them something far deeper than just how to paddle a kayak. It revealed the true nature of negotiation. Negotiation isn't about overpowering the other person to get what you want. It's about steering, a process of guiding the conversation or relationship in a way that benefits both sides. Just like they needed to work together in the kayak, any successful negotiation depends on both parties working toward a shared outcome, rather than pulling in opposite directions. The struggle they faced in that kayak is a perfect analogy for how many people approach negotiation. Too often, we focus on controlling the situation, pushing our own agenda without stopping to think about what the other side wants or needs. We paddle harder, thinking that if we just apply more effort, we can force things to go our way. But in reality, this approach often leads to conflict and frustration, much like the repeated capsizing of the kayak. Successful negotiation, much like steering that kayak, requires a different mindset. Instead of trying to win at all costs, the focus should be on understanding the other party's perspective and finding a path that works for both sides. It's about collaboration, not confrontation. The couple's breakthrough moment came when they stopped trying to control the direction themselves and started working together. They didn't need to fully agree on everything. They just needed to agree on where they were headed. This idea of steering rather than controlling has become a central concept in negotiation theory, particularly in recent years. The old mindset of win-lose negotiation, where one side's gain comes at the expense of the other, has been increasingly replaced by a more collaborative approach. The traditional hardball tactics, where the goal is to dominate the conversation and come out on top, might work in the short term, but they often damage relationships and lead to resentment. Today, negotiation experts focus more on what's called win-win or integrative negotiation. This approach seeks to create outcomes that satisfy the interests of both parties. It's about problem-solving together, finding creative solutions that allow everyone to feel like they've gained something. It's not just about reaching an agreement. It's about building a relationship that can continue to thrive long after the negotiation is over. Take, for example, a salary negotiation. In the past, these discussions were often seen as a tug-of-war, with employees trying to get as much as possible, while employers tried to minimize costs. But this approach can lead to dissatisfaction on both sides. An employee who feels undervalued may become disengaged or even leave, while the employer misses out on the opportunity to retain and motivate talent. Now, imagine a different approach. During the salary discussion, the employee not only talks about compensation but also shares their long-term career goals, expressing a desire for professional growth. The employer, instead of focusing solely on salary limits, listens and offers a package that includes a reasonable pay increase along with opportunities for training and development. Both sides come away feeling satisfied. The employee feels valued, and the employer retains a motivated, loyal team member. This is the essence of steering in negotiation, finding a direction that works for both parties and strengthens the relationship over time. This concept applies not only in professional settings but also in personal relationships. Whether it's negotiating responsibilities at home, resolving a disagreement with a friend, or making plans with family, the same principles hold true. When each person is focused solely on getting their way, the relationship suffers. But when both sides take the time to listen, understand each other's needs, and work together, they can find solutions that benefit everyone. The couple in the kayak learned this lesson the hard way. At first, they were so focused on their individual desires that they didn't even realize they were working against each other. But once they started communicating and collaborating, the entire experience changed. They stopped fighting the current and started flowing with it. The joy they had originally hoped for returned, not because one person got their way, but because they found a way to move forward together. This lesson is at the heart of every successful negotiation. It's not about overpowering the other side or winning at all costs. It's about steering the conversation, guiding the relationship, and finding a path that works for everyone involved. In the long run, those who focus on steering rather than controlling are the ones who build stronger, more sustainable relationships, whether that's in the boardroom, at home, or, as this couple discovered, in a kayak. When we approach negotiation as a collaborative effort, we stop seeing the other person as an opponent to be defeated and start seeing them as a partner in finding a solution. This shift in perspective makes all the difference. Instead of clashing and capsizing, we start paddling in the same direction, and things begin to move smoothly. Just like the couple in the kayak, we often find ourselves in situations where we're pulling in different directions. It's easy to get caught up in our own goals and forget that the other person has their own perspective too. But when we take the time to pause, communicate, and align our efforts, we find that progress comes much easier. We don't have to capsize over and over again. We can steer toward a shared destination. And that's what true negotiation is all about, not controlling the outcome, but steering the relationship, guiding it toward a result that benefits both sides. Whether you're on a river or in the middle of a tough conversation, the key is the same. Stop fighting for control, start working together, and you'll find that you can go much further than you ever could on your own. Chapter 2. Curious people make more money. The most effective negotiators don't just come to the table with a plan, they come with a genuine desire to learn. Negotiation, at its core, is about understanding. Yet, so many people enter negotiations focused solely on what they want, what they need, and how they can win. The result? Missed opportunities and suboptimal deals. The most successful negotiators approach each discussion with curiosity as their secret weapon. They ask open-ended questions to truly understand the other party's needs, priorities, and goals. This is how they uncover hidden interests and create value on both sides of the table. Take, for example, a situation where two companies are negotiating a potential merger. Both sides have their own priorities. One might be looking for a way to grow its market share, while the other is more concerned with preserving its company culture. If neither side asks the right questions, they could spend the entire negotiation talking past each other, each pushing for their own agenda. But when one party starts by asking, "What are your biggest priorities in this merger?" it shifts the conversation. Suddenly, the focus is on understanding, not just winning. This simple question reveals valuable insights that can shape the rest of the negotiation. This idea of curiosity-driven negotiation isn't just theoretical. In a study conducted by Harvard professor Deepak Malhotra, it was found that 93% of negotiators fail to ask the right questions. Instead, they jump straight into bargaining, trying to secure their own interests without fully understanding the other sides. This leads to missed opportunities, as both parties remain focused on their initial positions rather than exploring creative solutions that could benefit both. However, the top 7% of negotiators, the ones who consistently achieve better outcomes, start by asking open-ended questions. They ask things like, "What are your biggest priorities?" Or, "Can you tell me more about what you're trying to achieve?" These questions may seem simple, but they are incredibly powerful. They invite the other party to share their true concerns and goals, often revealing information that can lead to a better deal for everyone involved. Let's consider an example from the world of business development. A sales executive is negotiating a major deal with a potential client. If they focus solely on pitching their product and its benefits, they may miss out on understanding what the client actually needs. But if they start by asking, "What challenges are you currently facing?" or "What are you hoping to achieve with this partnership?" they immediately shift the conversation. Now, instead of just selling a product, they are offering a solution tailored to the client's specific needs. This approach not only increases the likelihood of closing the deal, but also builds trust and rapport, setting the stage for a long-term relationship. This is precisely why curious people tend to make more money in negotiations. Curiosity leads to better questions, which in turn lead to better information. And the more information you have, the more value you can create. When you understand the other party's needs, you're in a much stronger position to offer solutions that work for both sides. This doesn't mean giving up your own goals or compromising on what you want. It means finding creative ways to meet both sets of needs. In today's business world, curiosity is more important than ever. Companies that encourage curiosity in their employees see significant benefits, not just in negotiation, but in all aspects of their work. A 2021 study by Forbes found that companies that prioritize curiosity in their sales teams see a 20% increase in closing rates. This is because curious negotiators ask the right questions, uncovering valuable information that allows them to tailor their proposals to meet the other party's specific needs. In contrast, negotiators who are too focused on pushing their own agenda often miss out on these opportunities, leaving money on the table. Let's take a closer look at the tech industry, where companies like Apple and Google have built entire cultures around curiosity-driven leadership. These companies encourage their teams to ask questions that challenge assumptions, push boundaries, and lead to innovative solutions. In negotiation, this same approach can open doors to opportunities that might otherwise remain hidden. For example, when negotiating a new partnership, a curious executive might start by asking, "What are your goals for this project?" Or, "How do you see this partnership evolving in the future?" These questions are not just about gathering information. They are about building a deeper understanding of the other party's vision and priorities. This kind of insight can lead to more tailored, successful partnerships, where both sides feel like they've won. Curiosity is also a powerful tool for building trust in negotiation. When you ask open-ended questions and show a genuine interest in understanding the other party's needs, you demonstrate that you're not just in it for yourself. This builds empathy and rapport, which are critical elements of any successful negotiation. People are much more likely to be flexible and open to compromise when they feel understood and respected. On the other hand, if you enter a negotiation with a hard, self-centered approach, you risk alienating the other party and making it more difficult to reach an agreement. Consider a real-life example from the world of human resources. A company is negotiating a benefits package with a potential hire. The company is focused on offering a competitive salary, but the candidate is more concerned with work-life balance and opportunities for professional development. If the hiring manager doesn't ask the right questions, they might assume that salary is the most important factor and fail to address the candidate's true priorities. But if they start by asking, "What's most important to you in your next role?" or "What kind of support do you need to grow in your career?" they can uncover the candidate's real concerns. This allows the company to offer a benefits package that meets the candidate's needs without necessarily increasing the salary offer. As a result, both sides are satisfied with the outcome. This same principle applies in everyday life, not just in high-stakes business negotiations. Whether you're negotiating with your spouse about weekend plans or discussing a project with a colleague, asking open-ended questions can lead to better outcomes. Instead of assuming you know what the other person wants, take the time to ask, "What's important to you?" or "How can we make this work for both of us?" These simple questions can transform a potentially contentious conversation into a collaborative effort to find the best solution. Curiosity also plays a key role in resolving conflicts. When people are in the middle of a disagreement, they often become entrenched in their positions, convinced that they are right and the other person is wrong. But when you approach the situation with curiosity, you can diffuse tension and open up new possibilities for resolution. By asking questions like, "Can you help me understand where you're coming from?" or "What's most important to you in this situation?" you invite the other person to share their perspective. This not only helps you understand their point of view, but also shows that you value their input, which can lead to a more productive and respectful conversation. One of the biggest challenges in negotiation is overcoming assumptions. We all have our own biases and preconceived notions about what the other party wants or needs. But these assumptions can limit our ability to see the full picture. Curiosity allows us to break through these barriers and explore new possibilities. When we ask open-ended questions, we're not just gathering information, we're challenging our own assumptions and opening ourselves up to new insights. Think about how often you've entered a negotiation with a fixed idea of what the other party wants, only to be surprised when they reveal something completely different. This is why asking questions is so important. It forces us to listen, to put aside our assumptions, and to truly understand the other person's needs. And in doing so, we often find solutions that we never would have considered otherwise. At the end of the day, the most successful negotiators aren't the ones who dominate the conversation or push the hardest for their own agenda. They're the ones who ask questions, listen, and uncover the other party's true interests. They use curiosity as a tool to build trust, gather information, and create value for both sides. And in doing so, they not only achieve better outcomes, but also build stronger, more lasting relationships. In a world where so many people are focused on winning, those who take the time to ask questions and understand the other party's needs stand out. They're the ones who close more deals, build better partnerships, and ultimately make more money. Curiosity isn't just a soft skill. It's a powerful tool for success in negotiation, and it's one that too many people overlook. But for those who embrace it, the rewards are clear: better deals, stronger relationships, and a reputation as someone who truly understands how to create value in any negotiation. If you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Your subscription helps us keep creating content with love and dedication. Chapter 3. Negotiation starts before the negotiation starts. Negotiation doesn't start when you sit down across from the other party. It begins much earlier, when you're by yourself, reflecting on what you truly need and want from the conversation. This is the negotiation with a mirror, the internal dialogue where you clarify your own goals, confront your doubts, and prepare to advocate for yourself. It's a process of introspection, a chance to understand your own priorities before you even consider the other person's. Surprisingly, this part of negotiation is often overlooked, yet it's crucial to your success. Many people approach negotiations without a clear sense of what they want or, more importantly, why they want it. They think they'll figure it out during the conversation, assuming they can adapt as they go. But this lack of preparation leads to confusion, mixed signals, and ultimately, missed opportunities. When you don't take the time to negotiate with yourself first, you enter the room unsure, reactive rather than proactive, and easily swayed by external pressures. The negotiation may seem to begin when you start speaking, but in reality, it started long before that moment, back when you were alone with your thoughts, deciding what you actually wanted to achieve. Consider someone preparing for a salary negotiation. They might know on the surface that they want more money, but how much? And why? Do they want a higher salary because they feel undervalued, or are they seeking more compensation to fund a specific personal goal? Do they know what other forms of compensation, like flexible working hours or stock options, might be equally valuable to them? And perhaps most importantly, what successes from their past justify their request? Without clear answers to these questions, they might walk into the negotiation uncertain, which makes it easier to be thrown off course when the conversation gets tough. This process of reflection, where you take the time to look inward and assess your needs, is the foundation of any successful negotiation. It's about understanding your priorities, but also about recognizing your strengths and past successes. When you look back at times you've negotiated well, whether in work, relationships, or everyday interactions, you can identify patterns. What strategies did you use? What worked and why? These reflections aren't just about boosting your confidence, though they certainly help with that. They're also about honing your approach. Success leaves clues, and if you can pinpoint what's worked for you before, you'll know how to leverage those tactics in the future. There's a reason why top negotiators, whether they're CEOs closing multimillion-dollar deals or diplomats brokering peace agreements, spend just as much time preparing as they do in the actual negotiation itself. They're not just preparing facts and figures, they're mentally rehearsing the conversation. They anticipate the other party's concerns, yes, but more importantly, they clarify their own needs and motivations. They visualize the negotiation, see themselves succeeding, and imagine how they'll respond to potential challenges. This internal preparation sets the tone for the actual negotiation, providing a solid foundation from which to navigate the conversation. Think about athletes before a big game. Many of them don't just train physically, they mentally rehearse their performance. They close their eyes and visualize themselves scoring that goal, making that shot, winning the race. This mental preparation builds confidence and reinforces their belief in their ability to succeed. The same principle applies in negotiation. Visualization helps you not only mentally prepare, but also emotionally align with your goals. When you see yourself achieving a successful outcome, you're more likely to believe it's possible, and that belief becomes a powerful tool when you're actually in the room negotiating. The study by Harvard professor Deepak Malhotra shows just how powerful this kind of preparation can be. His research found that people who took the time to visualize their past successes and prepare mentally for negotiations were significantly more likely to enter the conversation with confidence. This confidence wasn't just psychological. It translated directly into better outcomes. When you take the time to reflect on what's worked for you in the past, you're able to approach negotiations with a clear sense of what you bring to the table. You know your strengths, you know your value, and you know exactly why you deserve what you're asking for. This concept of self-reflection before negotiation is gaining traction not just in business, but also in the field of psychology. Behavioral economists have coined the term preparation effect to describe how people who mentally prepare for tasks tend to perform better. It's not just about knowing your facts or rehearsing your arguments. It's about getting into the right mindset. When you take time to reflect, to align your goals and review your strengths, you walk into the negotiation room with a sense of calm and control. You're not there to react to what the other person says. You're there to steer the conversation in the direction that benefits you. Athletes have long understood the importance of this kind of preparation, and now it's becoming increasingly common in executive coaching. Top business leaders are taught to visualize their performance before important negotiations, much like athletes visualize their performance before a game. By rehearsing key points, anticipating objections, and imagining a successful outcome, these leaders set themselves up for success. They walk into the negotiation not just prepared, but confident, with a clear understanding of what they want and why they deserve it. Take the example of a high-stakes business deal. Before the actual negotiation begins, top executives spend weeks, sometimes months, preparing. This preparation doesn't just involve gathering data or drafting proposals. It's about mentally rehearsing the conversation. They reflect on past deals that were successful, identifying the strategies that worked and the mistakes they made. They think about what they want from the current deal, but they also reflect on what the other party might want. By the time they sit down at the table, they're not just prepared, they're confident, clear, and ready to steer the conversation toward a mutually beneficial outcome. The idea that negotiation starts before the negotiation starts is one that can be applied in everyday life too. Consider a difficult conversation you've had with a family member or partner, maybe about something as simple as where to go for the holidays, or something more complex like balancing finances or shared responsibilities. If you've ever gone into these conversations without being clear on your own needs or priorities, you've likely experienced how quickly things can go sideways. But if you take the time beforehand to reflect on what you really want, what compromises you're willing to make, and what past experiences have taught you, the conversation is likely to go much smoother. You're more grounded, more confident, and more in control of the outcome. Self-reflection also helps you anticipate potential challenges. When you take the time to think through the negotiation before it happens, you can prepare for objections and counterarguments. You can think about what the other person might say and how you'll respond. This mental rehearsal doesn't just make you feel more prepared, it actually helps you navigate the conversation more effectively when it happens. You're not caught off guard by unexpected questions or objections because you've already considered them in your preparation. There's a reason why negotiation experts emphasize the importance of preparation. It's not just about knowing the facts, it's about knowing yourself. When you take the time to negotiate with yourself before sitting down with the other party, you clarify your goals, identify your strengths, and build confidence. You're able to approach the conversation with a clear sense of purpose, which not only helps you get what you want, but also makes the other person more likely to respect and value your position. This internal preparation can make all the difference, especially in high-pressure situations. In a negotiation, confidence is key, and confidence comes from knowing yourself, knowing what you want, why you want it, and what you're willing to fight for. When you take the time to reflect on your past successes, you remind yourself of what you're capable of. You see the patterns of how you've negotiated well in the past, and you carry that knowledge into your current negotiation. The negotiation with a mirror, the internal reflection that happens before you ever sit down at the table, is what sets the stage for success. When you know your own priorities and strengths, when you visualized your success and prepared for potential challenges, you're ready to approach the negotiation with clarity, confidence, and control. And that, more than anything else, is what leads to successful outcomes. Chapter 4. Land the plane, the power of silence. In negotiation, silence often feels like a void that needs to be filled. When you've made your point or asked a question, the urge to continue talking, to add more detail, or to explain yourself further can be overwhelming. But in reality, silence can be one of the most powerful tools in your negotiating arsenal. It's not the words you say that make the difference, it's knowing when to stop talking. When you land the plane, so to speak, and let the silence hang in the air, you give yourself and the other person a moment to process, to reflect, and often to reveal more than they intended. There's a story that illustrates this perfectly. It's about a brilliant sales executive who had all the skills on paper. He knew his product inside and out, could connect with clients, and had a natural charm that put people at ease. But he had one fatal flaw: he couldn't handle silence. After delivering a key point or asking a crucial question during a negotiation, he'd feel uncomfortable with the lull in conversation. That discomfort led him to start talking again, filling the air with unnecessary details, trying to reassure himself or push the client toward agreement. The problem was, he often talked himself right out of a good deal. One particular meeting stands out. He was negotiating a large contract with a new client and had made a solid pitch. The client was interested, but after asking a pivotal question about pricing, the executive couldn't help himself. He jumped in almost immediately to clarify, adding extra explanations about potential discounts and throwing in perks that weren't even on the table. By the time he stopped talking, the client knew there was more flexibility in the price than originally stated. The deal was still made, but at a lower rate than what the executive could have gotten if he just stayed silent after asking his question. This habit of over-talking in negotiations is common. It stems from a deep-rooted discomfort with silence, an instinct that silence is awkward, that it signifies a lack of control or authority in the conversation. But the truth is, silence can be your greatest ally in a negotiation. When you stop talking and let silence do the work, you create space for the other person to process what you've said. More often than not, that silence will prompt them to fill the gap, offering more information than they originally intended, revealing their thoughts and concerns, or even making concessions they hadn't planned on. There's a psychological phenomenon at play here, one that researchers call response tension. When you ask a question and leave silence in the air, the other party feels a subtle pressure to respond. People are naturally uncomfortable with silence in conversations. It feels like a break in the rhythm of interaction. And when faced with that silence, they often speak without fully thinking through their response, revealing key details or softening their stance to move the conversation forward. This is why seasoned negotiators use silence as a strategic tool. They know that the longer they can hold the silence, the more likely they are to gain valuable insights or concessions. The power of silence in negotiation has become a topic of serious research in recent years. A 2020 study by MIT found that negotiators who deliberately use pauses and silences are perceived as more thoughtful, competent, and collaborative by their counterparts. The study showed that people who pause before responding are often seen as having greater authority and confidence, while those who rush to fill the silence can come across as less sure of their position. This perception alone can shift the dynamics of the negotiation, giving the silent party an upper hand without them having to say anything at all. In professional settings like sales, venture capital, and even diplomacy, silence is often taught as a deliberate tactic. For example, in the world of venture capital, investors are known for using silence to their advantage during pitch meetings. When a startup founder is presenting their idea and an investor asks a critical question like, "How did you arrive at your valuation?" or "What's your plan if you don't hit your growth targets?" they often sit back and let the silence work. In many cases, the founder, nervous and eager to please, will start talking again, offering more information than necessary, sometimes even undermining their own position by revealing doubts or weaknesses they hadn't meant to share. The investor, meanwhile, has gained valuable insight without having to press for it. This tactic is so effective that it's become a standard in high-stakes negotiations. Salespeople, lawyers, and diplomats are trained to resist the urge to fill silence after they've made a key point or asked an important question. By holding their ground and letting the other person speak first, they often find that the other party reveals their position or makes concessions before they've even been asked to do so. It's a subtle but powerful way to guide the conversation without appearing aggressive or domineering. I remember once being part of a negotiation that hinged on a single, critical point, pricing for a long-term contract. The room was tense. After hours of back-and-forth discussions, the lead negotiator from our side made the final offer and then, crucially, said nothing. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. At first, the other side shuffled papers, clearly uncomfortable. Then they began whispering amongst themselves. Finally, one of them spoke up, offering a lower price but sweetening the deal with a longer commitment and additional services that were not part of the original conversation. If we had spoken first, we might have missed that opportunity. But the silence gave them space to reconsider and come back with a better offer. This kind of strategic silence can also play a huge role in personal negotiations. Think about any difficult conversation you've had with a friend, partner, or family member. Often, emotions run high, and the instinct is to fill every gap with explanations or justifications. But if you ask a thoughtful question or make an important point, and then let the silence hang, you'll often find that the other person starts to open up. They may share their true feelings or concerns in a way that they wouldn't have if you kept talking. Silence gives them the space to be vulnerable, to process what you've said, and to respond in a more thoughtful way. There's something deeply human about the discomfort we feel in silence. We're social creatures, and conversation is how we connect with others. Silence, in a way, feels like disconnection, like we're losing control of the interaction. But when used correctly, silence can actually deepen that connection. It shows that you're confident enough in your position to let the other person take their time. It demonstrates that you're not in a rush, that you're willing to listen, and that you value what the other person has to say. This builds trust, which is essential for any successful negotiation. In the world of sales, where every word can feel like a step toward closing the deal, silence is particularly powerful. A good salesperson knows that after making an offer, the worst thing they can do is keep talking. Once the offer is on the table, it's time to step back and let the buyer respond. If the salesperson continues to talk, they risk diluting the value of their offer, adding unnecessary details that might confuse or overwhelm the buyer. But if they stay silent, the buyer is left to consider the offer on its own merits, and often, they'll come back with a response that's more favorable than if the salesperson had kept pushing. This is why silence is sometimes referred to as letting the plane land. In negotiation, you need to know when to stop talking, when to let your point sink in, and when to give the other person the space to respond. If you keep circling the point, talking in circles, or adding more detail, you risk missing the moment when the deal could actually close. But if you let the plane land, if you embrace the silence and let it work in your favor, you create the opportunity for the other person to meet you where you are. It's not about being passive or unengaged. It's about being strategic. By letting silence fill the room, you give yourself the chance to observe, to listen, and to learn. You allow the other person to process and, often, to reveal more than they intended. And in that silence, you find a space where deals are made, relationships are built, and negotiations succeed. Chapter 5. Make your adversary your partner. Negotiation often feels like a battle. The image of two sides squaring off, each determined to win at the expense of the other, has been ingrained in our minds. But the reality is, in most negotiations, the person sitting across from you isn't your enemy. More often than not, there's someone you'll continue to work with long after the negotiation is over, a boss, a colleague, a client, or even a business partner. Viewing negotiation as a zero-sum game, where one side must lose for the other to win, can damage relationships that are important to your long-term success. Instead, what if we thought of negotiation as a way to create a partnership rather than an adversarial contest? I recall a story of a seasoned diplomat who found himself in a particularly difficult negotiation. The stakes were high, and tensions in the room were thick. The opposing diplomat was visibly frustrated and left the negotiation abruptly, clearly feeling disrespected by something that had been said. In many situations, this could have been the end of the talks, or at least a severe blow to any chances of reaching an agreement. But instead of allowing the situation to spiral out of control, the negotiator followed the upset diplomat out to the parking lot. In that quiet, informal space, he approached him not as an adversary, but as a partner. He reassured him, calmly explaining that they were on the same side, both working toward the same larger goal. They weren't enemies, just two people trying to navigate a complicated issue. This small act of empathy completely changed the dynamic. The diplomat, who had felt slighted moments earlier, softened. The conversation in the parking lot allowed them to reset, and they were able to return to the negotiation table with a renewed sense of collaboration. The deal was salvaged, not because of aggressive tactics or a brilliant argument, but because one negotiator recognized that building a relationship was more important than winning a single point in the negotiation. This story illustrates a key point about negotiation. It's not just about the immediate win. It's about building relationships that will last long after the deal is done. Whether you're negotiating a business deal, a salary increase, or even working out terms with a contractor for home renovations, the chances are that you'll need to interact with this person again in the future. The way you handle the negotiation can either pave the way for a productive partnership or create lasting tension. This is why empathy, respect, and collaboration are far more effective in the long run than trying to defeat the other person. In modern negotiation theory, this idea of working together toward shared goals is gaining traction. Behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman has championed the concept of adversarial collaboration. The term may sound contradictory at first, but it captures a crucial shift in how we think about negotiation. Kahneman's idea is simple. Even when two parties have different interests or are in direct conflict, they can still work together to find solutions that benefit both sides. Rather than viewing the negotiation as a battlefield, where only one party can emerge victorious, adversarial collaboration encourages both parties to recognize that they are interdependent. The best outcomes come from mutual understanding and shared goals. This shift in mindset has had a major impact on how companies approach contracts and partnerships. In the past, business negotiations often focused on short-term gains. Companies would try to squeeze as much value as possible from their partners, often at the expense of the relationship. But today, there's a growing recognition that long-term partnerships are far more valuable than one-time victories. This has led to the rise of collaborative contracting, where companies enter negotiations with the intention of creating sustainable, mutually beneficial relationships. Consider the example of two tech companies negotiating a partnership. In the old model, each company would focus on maximizing its own benefit from the deal, often leading to a tense, competitive atmosphere. But in a collaborative contracting model, both companies recognize that their success is intertwined. They approach the negotiation not as adversaries, but as partners, working together to create a deal that will allow both sides to thrive over the long term. By prioritizing the relationship over short-term gains, they're able to build a stronger, more resilient partnership that can adapt to future challenges. This approach is just as relevant in smaller-scale negotiations. Think about negotiating with your boss for a raise. If you approach the conversation as a battle, where your goal is to win by getting the biggest salary increase possible, the negotiation could become tense, especially if your boss feels like they're losing. But if you frame the conversation as an opportunity to build a stronger working relationship, the dynamic changes. Instead of focusing solely on what you want, you can explore ways to align your goals with the company's needs. You might discover that while there's limited room for a salary increase, there are other benefits, like more flexible hours, professional development opportunities, or leadership roles that can meet both your needs and the company's. This collaborative mindset doesn't mean you should back down from asking for what you want. On the contrary, it allows you to approach the negotiation with greater confidence. When you know that both you and the other party are working toward a shared goal, you can be more open, more honest, and more creative in finding solutions. You're not trying to outmaneuver your counterpart. You're trying to find a path forward together. I've seen this play out in countless professional settings. One colleague of mine, for example, was negotiating a major contract with a client who was notoriously difficult to work with. The client had a reputation for pushing hard in negotiations, often leaving their partners feeling squeezed. But instead of approaching the negotiation as a confrontation, my colleague framed it as an opportunity to build a partnership. She spent extra time learning about the client's business and their long-term goals. When she entered the negotiation, she was able to show the client how the contract would benefit them not just in the short term, but over the long run as well. By shifting the conversation from adversarial to collaborative, she was able to secure a much better deal, one that the client was excited about because it aligned with their future success. This same principle applies even in everyday negotiations, like working with a contractor to renovate your home. If you approach the contractor with an adversarial mindset, trying to get the lowest possible price for the work, the contractor might feel undervalued and rush through the job, cutting corners to make it work within the budget. But if you approach the conversation as a partnership, showing respect for the contractor's expertise, asking for their input on how to achieve the best results, and being open to their suggestions, you're more likely to get high-quality work at a fair price. The contractor becomes invested in the project's success, knowing that you're working together toward a shared goal. Empathy is at the core of making your adversary your partner. It's about seeing the negotiation from the other person's perspective and recognizing that they have their own needs, concerns, and motivations. When you approach a negotiation with empathy, you're more likely to find common ground. You can start to see the areas where your interests overlap and use those shared goals to build a stronger, more productive relationship. In high-stakes negotiations, empathy can be the difference between a deal that falls apart and a deal that creates lasting value. I've seen this in action in the corporate world, where tense negotiations often seem to be on the verge of collapse until one party extends an olive branch, offering a compromise or showing a willingness to understand the other's position. This shift in tone can transform the entire negotiation, turning it from a battle into a collaborative problem-solving session. This is why successful negotiators don't view the other party as an adversary to be defeated. Instead, they see them as a partner in reaching a mutually beneficial outcome. This doesn't mean that you should always give in or accept a bad deal just to maintain the relationship. But it does mean that by approaching the negotiation as an opportunity to build a partnership, you can create better outcomes for both sides. The power of making your adversary your partner lies in the fact that most negotiations aren't one-time events. The person sitting across from you today may be someone you work with for years to come. By fostering a collaborative relationship from the start, you're investing in the long-term success of that relationship. You're building trust, understanding, and a foundation for future success. And in the end, that's worth far more than any short-term victory. Negotiation isn't just about getting what you want. It's about building bridges, fostering relationships, and creating outcomes that benefit everyone involved. When we approach negotiation with empathy, curiosity, and a willingness to collaborate, we shift the dynamic from adversarial to cooperative. It's no longer about who wins and who loses. It's about finding solutions that allow both sides to walk away feeling valued and understood. As we've explored, the most effective negotiators don't rely on aggressive tactics or endless talking. They listen, they ask the right questions, they embrace silence, and most importantly, they recognize that the person across from them isn't an enemy, but a potential partner. By shifting your mindset and using these powerful techniques, you'll not only become a better negotiator, but also a stronger communicator in every aspect of life. Thank you for sticking with us until the end. Your likes and subscription are very important to us. Help us keep the Books Project alive and continue delivering high-quality content. Wishing you peace and see you next time.